This episode of SpectreSoundStudios is brought to you by theplaidzebra.com, helping you find the answer to the question, what the fuck am I going to do with this diploma? Hey guys, I got a ton of requests for this video, so here goes. If you want to learn how to solder, I'll lay it out for you in the simplest terms I can. However, this will still be too complex for the average bass player, so those guys can leave the room and go waste oxygen somewhere else. So what I'm going to show you guys is a typical soldering job, building a mic cable. And for this job, you're going to need a soldering iron, rosin core solder. We want rosin core as it cleans the connecting parts as the joint is made. This is a huge time saver. Be sure to get a fairly fine gauge as we're doing audio connections here and not structural welds. You're also going to need wire strippers and a clamping system of some kind. You'll need something to hold the parts in place while you work. Alligator clips work, but I like the stability of a small vise. Mic cable. Male and female mic connectors. Okay, the first thing you're going to want to do is to strip your wire. I sped things up here to save time. Then, thread your connector sleeves down the cable before you make your solder joints. Then, secure your connector end in the vise. Next up is a process called tinning up. This is where a small amount of solder is melted onto the tip of the soldering iron. This helps transfer heat to the surfaces you'd like to connect. And this part is absolutely critical. You will save yourself a lot of grief by tinning up before you attempt to make a joint. Next, insert a wire into the connector. Bring in your soldering iron and use the iron to hold the wire to the connector, freeing up your hand to grab the solder. This also heats up both the wire and the connector to a point where a solid solder connection can be made. Touch a bit of solder into the connector and it should melt. You will not need very much here. Remove the iron and hold the wire in place as the solder solidifies. A gentle tug should tell you if you've made a good connection. I have to stress, it's absolutely critical to heat up what you want to connect and not just the solder itself. Repeat the process on the next connectors and that's pretty much all there is to it. So the question remains, why do so many guys have trouble with this? Because there's a popular misconception that solder works like glue. It doesn't. This is not an adhesive substance. If you just melt solder over some metal, the joint will never hold. And here's why. What a good solder joint really does is to create an alloy that's combining two metals. Now I'm going to explain what's going on here the best I can and from what I understand. If I get the science wrong, please don't fucking crucify me. Okay, when you heat up an object or a substance, the molecules start moving rapidly, and they move further apart. This is the same principle that works in a hot air balloon. It also works here. So when you add in solder and then allow it to cool, the molecules of the object collapse down around the solder molecules, locking them in place and fusing the metal together. You've just created a permanent bond. And that's all there really is to it. It takes a little practice to get good at it, but it's well worth the effort. If you run your own studio, this is an invaluable skill. I've wired up my own patch bays, built my own custom cables, and even rewired a vintage broadcast console for discrete preamp outputs. It's also a great idea to throw a soldering kit together and carry it in your gig bag, as you can save the day when an input jack breaks or a cable breaks, and believe me, yes, it's gonna happen. So there you go, guys. Simple instructions pretty much anyone but a bass player can follow. However, I'm sure I'll get a few angry comments from them once they learn how to stop drooling all over themselves and turn on a computer. Until that happens, don't hold your breath. Please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next week.